She-Hulk, Attorney at Law. Now this one's an interesting one because I remember when people were talking about the fact that there isn't a Mark Ruffalo solo Hulk film, will there be a series about it or will there be a film, etc. But it's an odd one because it's actually not the first time that we've seen the Hulk in a solo film or series within this universe, and yet it doesn't star Mark Ruffalo. Of course, I'm referring to The Incredible Hulk back in 2008, which starred Edward Norton in the title role. And at the time, it was actually only the second film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But because Edward Norton cut ties with Disney and Mark Ruffalo took over and has appeared a number of times since then, it's almost forgotten. And to be fair, we've been craving a Hulk film for a long time. And I know that a lot of people would say we wanted Hulk, you know, Mark Ruffalo's version. But this time, we've got the female version, of course, being She-Hulk. So She-Hulk Attorney at Law follows young lawyer Jennifer Walters, who, after an injury from a car crash, is cross-contaminated with her cousin Bruce Banner's blood. This results in her transforming into a Hulk as she adapts to her career and romantic relationships with this new alternate identity. So the series does sound like a typical origin story about a young, normal person who is, you know, conveniently contaminated into something else, and then they have to come to terms with it, and then they become a superhero, and then they make their choices as to whether to do it right or wrong. And this one follows suit in that respect, but it follows it in a very kind of cheesy and very unusual way. And to me, the story did kind of feel like it was separate from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it was like its own thing. In some way, a bit like Moon Knight and Miss Marvel, where they did feel like individual shows rather than being part of this huge franchise. And when you've got something like this that kind of does feel separate from everything else, it's intriguing in some ways, but it's also quite unsettling as well. And I think a large portion of that, particularly regarding the TV shows, is how the medium of television is different to the medium of film. And that's because of the fact that the stories are so much more stretched out, and it just leaves a number of questions as to why they decided to make it a TV series when they could have actually made it like one 2-hour film or two 2-hour films or just a trilogy. So there were just a few question marks for me about the approach to this. How will they expand a story and develop it and make it, you know, engaging enough over the course of 9 weeks to keep people interested? And there were some cases in this show where I did feel it was particularly stretched, especially like from episodes 4 to 7, where one episode could essentially have just been a scene in a film, and sometimes it just felt a little bit unnecessary, where they could have just combined it and summarised it a little bit more, because sometimes that's better rather than just having a story that's just continuing on and on and on and on and on. And that just gets boring and it doesn't get interesting. When you've got a superhero story like She-Hulk, you want it to be engaging, but in some parts of this series, I just didn't quite get that, particularly midway through. And the show, as well as the general comic book character, is particularly known for having broken the fourth wall, and that of course means the characters are directly speaking to the audience. Pretty much like what I'm doing right now by recording this video. And despite doing it in the comics, it still made me question why. And as they were in the comics, maybe the series and what they chose to do with the fourth wall didn't quite justify how they were written in the comics. So what I'm saying is maybe the fourth wall was a good idea to include as part of the character, but maybe just the way that it was written in the series didn't quite work and they could have done something a little bit different. But there was one really intriguing part about this series in terms of breaking the fourth wall, particularly in the final episode. I'm not going to talk into too much detail about it because you'll have to watch for yourself, but there was something that was just very, very unusual that expanded the multiverse even more. And without giving too much away, all I'll say is that it connects us, the audience, with the series. Not just within the series itself, but with the audience and how it relates to the franchise. So that's all I'll say about that. But I thought that particular moment and that scene was really, really good, and just how they did it was brilliant. And of course there were times when there were a lot of rom-com sequences and there were some very funny moments, but I just still didn't think it distracted from the fact that this series was majorly overstretched. And I think from a production standpoint, where I feel like, apart from the sequence I've mentioned, which is in the final episode, I felt like where it felt short was that it didn't have a very distinctive style that kind of kept us interested and kept us engaged, whereas other TV shows we've had managed to do that, but this one just didn't for me. And there were some technical aspects that I thought were interesting, but I think it was the CGI that let it down, especially on She-Hulk, and it was just ridiculous, it was horrible, and it just left me less convinced because of how poor the CGI was. But despite a number of things that were a little bit off with the production and the narrative structure, Tatiana Maslany was actually very good as Jennifer Walters, aka She-Hulk, and I did like her humour, and she did make me chuckle every now and again about a woman who's very successful in her career, but is pretty much like a lost cause as far as her romantic life is concerned. I think Maslany did the best with what she was given in terms of the performance and how she was going to portray She-Hulk, but I just didn't find her that much of a superhero. And I think back with the She-Hulk persona, even the transformation wasn't as exciting or as dramatic as it should have been, because it just happened like that. There was no build-up, there was no tension, there was no drama. It just happened and that was it. They could have just had a whole episode of just Jennifer Walters being Jennifer Walters, and then the episode ending on a cliffhanger where she did transform into the She-Hulk character. But the character's interesting because she's somewhat masculine, but she empowers women, and that's the interesting angle that this character goes down. And I thought some identity themes were quite interesting as well, because it distinguished between Jen having her romantic life, where no one's supposedly interested in her, but everyone's interested in She-Hulk. But despite overall enjoying Maslany's performance, I still don't think we entirely got the best out of a character who is supposedly the most empowering female superhero, at least from Marvel's point of view, of all time. So moving on, a character I'm really glad made an appearance in this series was Emil Blonsky, aka The Abomination, played again by Tim Roth. And he previously played the character in the 2008 film The Incredible Hulk. And I'm going to be honest, Tim Roth is truly one of the most underrated and underappreciated actors I think that we've ever seen in film. Just everything about him, he just brings a lot of grace and presence to a character, whether he's playing a hero or whether he's playing a villain. And here he just absolutely oozes energy into the series, despite being quite lackluster in terms of narrative structure and production. In many ways, a bit like Ben Kingsley's role in Iron Man 3. That's what I kind of think he brought to the table, of someone who is appeared as a villain and then he's kind of got a bit of a warmer nature to him, and he kind of works with the main character. So that's what I thought was good about Tim Roth's reappearance, and I'm looking forward to seeing, hopefully, him come back in the future again. And of course it's a series about the Hulk, and we couldn't not have Mark Ruffalo return as Bruce Banner, aka the Hulk, or now known as Smart Hulk. And despite his appearance being quite limited in the series, pretty much from being the beginning of it to the end, he was absolutely brilliant once again. He's made the character his own, and it was great to see him back in this series, and I do really want to see him carry on as the character in the future. So overall, She-Hulk Attorney at Law is showcased as a heartwarming romantic comedy TV show, but I just felt like it kind of lost track with who its target audience is. And I feel for me so far, despite having some good reviews of the films and the TV shows in Phase 4 so far, it sums it up for me, because that's where they have been a bit of a mixed bag, particularly regarding the TV shows, that Netflix have done them better than Marvel have. So I think Marvel and Disney should stick to the films, and Netflix should resume with the TV shows. Hence why Daredevil came back into it, of course, with the Netflix series. And I feel as though with Marvel at the moment, it's getting to a point where, through the mediums of film and television, that they're just milking every single storyline and just sometimes making a series as a series when it doesn't even need to be one, or making a film when that could be expanded a whole lot more. They've kind of lost a bit of track and direction as to what's going on. It just seems a bit overly bloated at the moment, and it just doesn't really kind of bring any purpose at the moment, really. So I'm hoping in the next year or so, when phases 5 and 6 come into the frame, that it will kind of start to take shape a little bit more. What did you think of She-Hulk Attorney at Law? Did you enjoy it, or did you not enjoy it? How would you compare it to the other TV shows that Marvel have done so far? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, if you did go on to enjoy this video, then please hit the like button and subscribe for more, and have a notification bell ticked so you're notified when I upload a new video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care, everybody.